The sky was turning gold and purple when Daniel's sleek black Mustang gave a loud cough and rolled to a stop at the edge of a lonely road. The town ahead was small, barely a cluster of rooftops, and the silence that followed felt heavy. Daniel, a man used to boardrooms, glass towers, and assistants who solved problems before he even noticed them, stepped out in disbelief. He loosened his tie, annoyed at the dust on his shoes, and tapped his phone screen again, only to see one bar fading in and out. No signal, no driver. He had insisted on driving alone for once, to clear his mind. And now, here he was, standing beside a car worth more than most houses, staring at smoke curling from under the hood like a silent joke from fate. He sighed, muttering to himself as he popped the hood open. The smell of oil and heat rushed out. The wires, metal, and tubes looked like a language he could never read. He poked at something with his key, as if money or status could make the engine obey him. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt small and helpless, a man trapped between sunset and silence. The sound of soft footsteps broke his frustration. He turned to see a small girl walking along the road, a backpack slung over one shoulder and a dented red toolbox dragging behind her. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her shoes were scuffed, her clothes simple, but her eyes carried a brightness that didn't belong to someone poor or lost it. Was the brightness of curiosity. She stopped a few steps away and looked up at him with a polite smile. "Mister, do you need help?" she asked gently, her voice clear in the fading light. Daniel blinked, not sure he heard right. "Thanks, kid, but this is a real car problem," he said with a forced laugh. He had spent his whole life paying people to fix things. The idea of a little girl offering help to him, a millionaire, was almost funny. Yet she didn't laugh. She didn't even move. Instead, she walked closer, peering into the engine like someone who knew what she was looking for. Her small fingers pointed toward a corner of the hood. "That one's your problem," she said matter-of-factly. Daniel frowned and followed her finger. "That what?" "The cable," she said simply. "It's loose. That's why your car won't start." He stared at her, then at the cable, and for a second, he wasn't sure if this was real or some trick of the fading light. The girl set down her toolbox, dusted her hands, and stood on tiptoe to get a better view. Daniel watched, half amused and half unsure. There was something about her calm confidence that made him hesitate. The evening breeze picked up, carrying the faint smell of rain and distant wood smoke. The world around them grew quieter, as if waiting for what would happen next. He could have told her to go home. He could have called for help, waited for hours, and complained later to someone on his payroll. But something about her small hands, the dirt under her nails, the way she didn't seem afraid of him or his expensive car, made him step aside. "Go ahead then," he said finally. "Show me what I'm missing." She smiled, not arrogantly, but kindly, and reached into her toolbox. A tiny wrench, a screwdriver, and a roll of tape old but with. Daniel crossed his arms, pretending not to care, but inside he felt a strange mix of curiosity and disbelief. She worked quietly, her face serious, eyes focused. The way she moved, quick but gentle, reminded him of someone who had learned, not from books, but from life itself. After a few minutes, she wiped her hands on her shirt and looked up. "Try it now," she said. Daniel climbed into the driver's seat, feeling slightly foolish, and turned the key. The engine gave a sputter, then roared to life like nothing had ever been wrong. His eyes widened. The girl grinned. The sound of the running engine filled the air, but Daniel could only stare at her through the open window, speechless. "Told you," she said softly, closing her toolbox. Before he could even thank her, she had already started walking away, her small figure fading into the dusk. Daniel sat there, the purr of the engine behind him, and a question in his mind that he couldn't shake. Who was that girl, and how did she know so much? The night closed around him, and the road ahead suddenly felt less empty, but far more mysterious. Daniel stood beside his car, unsure whether to laugh or feel embarrassed as the little girl opened her old toolbox and knelt by the front tire. He watched her small hands move with quiet confidence, her focus sharp like someone who had done this many times before. The sun had dipped lower, turning the road into ribbons of orange light, and the sound of distant birds echoed in the fading air. She didn't waste a moment. Her fingers brushed across the metal, tracing the path of wires, testing each connection with gentle taps. "You see this one?" she said softly, without looking up. "It's loose. Cars stop breathing when you don't connect them right." Daniel blinked. Cars stop breathing. The way she spoke about machines sounded almost human. He hesitated for a moment, wanting to tell her she didn't have to do this, but something about her calm expression stopped him. He stepped back, hands in his pockets, pretending to check his phone, while his eyes followed every movement she made. She pulled a small wrench from the box and tightened a bolt that squeaked under pressure, then reached for a cable and pressed it back into place. A bit of grease stained her cheek, but she didn't seem to notice. Daniel wanted to ask where she learned this, but the look of quiet concentration on her face made him hold the question. She wiped her fingers on a torn cloth and nodded toward the driver's seat. "Try it now," she said, her voice steady. Daniel climbed in, still unsure. He turned the key, expecting the same silence, but the engine came alive in one smooth roar. The familiar hum of the Mustang filled the air, steady and strong. He froze, his hand still on the key, as if afraid that any sudden move would make it stop again. The headlights flickered to life, lighting up her small face. She smiled, proud but not surprised. Daniel stepped out slowly, shaking his head in disbelief. "How did you do that?" he asked. "Where did you learn something like that?" She shrugged lightly, looking down at her grease-covered hands. "My dad taught me," she said, almost whispering. Before he went away, Daniel's chest tightened at the softness in her voice. There was no anger in her tone, no bitterness, just a quiet ache. "You must be proud of him," he said gently. She nodded but didn't look at him. Her eyes drifted toward the horizon, where the sky was turning dark blue. "I am," she said after a pause. "He told me to always help people, no matter who they are. That's what he did." Her words struck him like a quiet truth. In his world of luxury cars, glass offices, and expensive suits, people only helped when there was something to gain. But here, on this empty road, a child had fixed his car without hesitation, not for reward, not for praise, but because it was right. Daniel felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was humility, maybe guilt, or maybe just the sudden realization that kindness could come from the smallest places. He reached into his wallet, pulling out a few bills. "Here," he said softly, "at least take this for your time." But she shook her head quickly, stepping back. "You don't have to pay me, sir," she said firmly, her voice polite but certain. "Just promise you'll help someone else when they need it. That's what my dad always said." Daniel froze, the money still in his hand. He looked at her, at the dirt on her shoes, the ink mark on her wrist, the tired but fearless eyes, and suddenly, the bills in his hand felt useless. Slowly, he put them back into his pocket. "You've got a deal," he said quietly. A smile tugged at her lips, quick and shy. She closed her toolbox, the old metal latching with a soft click, and started walking away down the road, her small shadow stretching long under the headlights. Daniel stood there, watching her until she disappeared around the corner. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a man who had everything. He felt like someone who had just been reminded of what really mattered. The engine hummed behind him, steady and strong, but the noise that filled his mind was her voice, "Help someone else." He didn't know it yet, but that simple promise would change his life forever. Daniel crouched down to thank the little girl, the cool evening air brushing against his face as the sound of the Mustang's revived engine filled the quiet road. The headlights cast a soft golden glow, lighting her small frame and the dust dancing in the air around them. He wanted to tell her how impressed he was, how rare it was to meet someone like her. But as he reached out to shake her hand, something shiny caught his eye. There, on her tiny finger, was a silver ring, old, scratched, and far too large for her hand. It looked fragile, like it had lived through years of memories. The stone in the center was dull and worn, but it still caught the light, glinting faintly like something that refused to fade. Daniel froze, his voice dropping. "That's a beautiful ring," he said softly. "Where did you get it?" The girl hesitated, her fingers curling protectively around it. For a moment, she looked as though she might not answer. The wind carried the faint sound of rustling trees, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Finally, she looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was my mom's," she said, clutching the ring close to her chest. "She gave it to me before she got sick." Her words came slowly, each one heavy with meaning, and Daniel could hear the unspoken story hidden behind them. The way she said before made his heart twist, because it didn't sound like her mother had ever recovered. The girl took a small breath and continued, her tone trembling. "She said as long as I wear it, she's still helping me fix things." She smiled then, a small, brave smile that didn't reach her eyes, and Daniel felt something stir deep inside him, a mix of sadness and admiration. He looked at her tiny hands, the grease still smudged across her skin, the faint bruises on her knuckles from turning bolts that were too tight for her strength, and he realized that this child carried a weight most grown men couldn't bear. He didn't know her story, but he didn't have to. The ring told him everything. It wasn't just jewelry. It was memory, comfort, and love, all wrapped around her finger. Daniel swallowed hard, trying to find words, but nothing seemed right. All the things that usually came so easily, polite replies, business talk, empty sympathy, felt meaningless here. The world he came from, full of money and meetings, had never felt so far away. Here was a little girl, standing in the dirt, wearing her mother's ring like armor. She wasn't asking for pity or praise. She was surviving. He smiled faintly, forcing his voice to steady. "You must be proud of her," he said. The girl's eyes softened. "I am," she replied quietly. "She always told me to look for the good in things, even broken things." Daniel nodded slowly, his throat tight. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sky had darkened completely now, and the stars were beginning to appear, scattered and quiet. The headlights of his car painted a pool of light around them, but everything beyond was shadow. He glanced at the ring one more time and felt a pang deep in his chest, not just for her, but for himself. Somewhere along the way, he realized, he had forgotten how to see beauty in broken things. He had spent his life fixing problems with money, never with heart. Yet this child, with nothing but courage and a memory, had managed to keep something precious alive. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It felt full, like it carried meaning neither of them could explain. Daniel wished he could do something for her, something more than words. But before he could speak again, she adjusted the strap of her school bag and smiled that quiet smile once more. "You should go before it gets too dark, sir," she said gently. "Your car's fine now." He nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the glint of silver on her finger. As she turned to walk away, the ring caught the last bit of light before disappearing into the evening shadows, leaving Daniel standing there with a strange ache in his chest. He didn't know why, but he had the feeling that the small girl with the silver ring had just changed. Something inside him, forever. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the little girl and the silver ring on her finger. That night, even as he sat in his big house surrounded by silence and city lights, her soft voice echoed in his mind. She said, "As long as I wear it, she's still helping me fix things." He barely slept, staring at the ceiling, wondering who she really was and what kind of life she lived. The next morning, before the sun was fully up. Daniel got into his Mustang and started driving toward the small town where his car had broken down. The same dusty road stretched before him, but this time it felt different, quieter, heavier, like it was pulling him toward something he didn't understand yet. When he reached the main street, he stopped by a little diner and asked the owner if she knew a young girl who carried a red toolbox. The woman looked surprised but smiled softly. "You must mean Mia," she said. "Lives with her grandmother near the forest. Sweet kid. Always fixing things for folks around here." Daniel thanked her and followed the directions. The town slowly gave way to trees and open fields until the road narrowed to a dirt path. At the end of it stood a small wooden house, the kind that looked like it had been standing for generations. The roof sagged slightly, the paint had faded, but there was something peaceful about it, a warmth that didn't come from wealth, but from care. He parked outside and knocked gently on the door. After a moment, an elderly woman opened it, her gray hair tied neatly, her eyes soft and kind. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. Daniel removed his hat and smiled nervously. "I'm looking for Mia. She helped me with my car yesterday." The woman's face brightened instantly. "Ah, you must be the man with the Mustang," she said. "Come in, please." Inside, the air smelled faintly of bread and old books. The furniture was worn but clean, the walls covered with photos and handmade decorations. It wasn't much, yet it felt like home in a way Daniel hadn't felt in years. At a small wooden table by the window sat Mia, her sleeves rolled up, working on an old radio. She looked up, surprised but happy to see him. "Hey, it's you," she said, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Is your car still okay?" Daniel smiled, his heart softening. "It's perfect. You did a great job." Her grandmother chuckled from the stove. "That girl can fix just about anything. Her daddy taught her before, well, before the accident." Daniel's smile faded slightly, but he didn't interrupt. The old woman turned, her eyes dimming with the kind of sadness that comes from years of holding memories close. "Her father was a mechanic," she said quietly. "Died when his workshop caught fire. Her mother passed not long after. Illness took her fast." She paused, stirring the pot on the stove, though nothing really needed stirring. "Mia's been helping people around here ever since, fixing radios, lamps, bikes, whatever she can. Says it makes her feel close to them." Daniel didn't know what to say. The words hit him harder than he expected. He looked at Mia, still sitting there, small and determined, humming softly as she tightened the screw on the radio. Her grandmother smiled faintly. "She never complains. She says helping people keeps her heart busy." Daniel felt something ache deep inside his chest. All the things he had spent years chasing, money, power, status, suddenly felt empty compared to this quiet strength. He remembered how she had refused his money, how she only asked him to help someone else. It wasn't pity he felt now. It was admiration. Here was a little girl who had lost almost everything yet carried herself with more courage than most adults he knew. "She's special," he said softly. The grandmother nodded. "She is. Her mother used to say, she was born to bring light wherever it's gone dark." Mia finished fixing the radio and turned the dial. A soft crackling tune filled the small room, and her face lit up. Daniel smiled, feeling his throat tighten. The house might have been old, but it was full of life, full of love that didn't need wealth to exist. In that moment, he realized something important. Mia had given him a gift he hadn't known he was missing. Perspective, a reminder that real value wasn't in things, but in people. He stood quietly for a while, watching her hum to the music, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt like he had found something money could never buy. A little girl's kindness that had changed the way he saw the world. Several days passed, but Daniel couldn't shake the memory of the little girl with the silver ring and the steady hands. Her face, her quiet strength, and her words kept replaying in his mind. "You don't have to pay me, sir." just help someone else. It was strange how a child had managed to reach a place inside him that years of success and luxury never could. He had spent his life surrounded by people who smiled for business, not kindness, yet one encounter with Mia had made him want to be better. So he began making calls, not to his usual clients or investors, but to a friend who ran an educational program for talented children. It took time, but he arranged something special, a scholarship at a well-known technical academy, a place where Mia's gift for fixing things could grow into something life-changing. When the letter was ready, sealed in a crisp white envelope, Daniel drove back to the small town. The sun was high that day, the air clear and still. As he neared the forest road, his heart beat faster, though he couldn't explain why. It wasn't nerves, it was something warmer, almost like excitement mixed with hope. He parked near the same small wooden house, still humble but welcoming, smoke rising gently from the chimney. The garden was full of yellow wildflowers, and the soft sound of a radio played from inside. He knocked, and Mia answered the door, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Mr. Daniel," she said, surprised. "Your car broke again." He laughed softly. "Not this time. It's still running perfectly, thanks to you." Her grandmother appeared behind her, smiling warmly. "You came all this way again, sir." Daniel nodded and reached into his coat pocket, pulling out the letter. "I came to bring you something," he said, holding it out. Mia blinked, confused, then took it carefully. "What is it?" "Open it," Daniel said. Her small fingers tore the envelope slowly, her brow furrowing as she read the neat handwriting. When she reached the part about the scholarship, her mouth fell open slightly. "A school," she whispered. "A real one. A technical academy," Daniel said. "They help children who are good with machines, kids like you. It's a full scholarship. You won't have to worry about anything." She looked up quickly, shaking her head. "But I can't. You already helped me. You don't have to do more." Daniel smiled gently. "You helped me first, remember? I'm just keeping my promise." She hesitated, glancing at her grandmother, who nodded with tears in her eyes. Slowly, Mia's lips curved into a smile, though her eyes shimmered. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just say yes," Daniel said softly. She took a deep breath, and then threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. The movement caught him off guard, and for a moment, he stood frozen, feeling something break open in his chest. It had been years since anyone had hugged him like that, honestly, without reason or expectation. He felt tears sting his eyes, real tears, the kind he hadn't felt in a long, long time. When she stepped back, her eyes were glowing, her cheeks flushed with happiness. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'll make you proud." Daniel smiled, brushing away a tear before it could fall. "You already have, Mia." They spent a few minutes talking, and Mia excitedly showed him a small project she was working on, an old radio she was trying to turn into a weather signal. Her mind amazed him. She wasn't just talented. She was driven, curious, unstoppable. Eventually, Daniel knew he had to leave. The sun was beginning to lower, spilling light across the garden. As he walked toward his car, he turned back one last time. Mia stood by the doorway, waving, the silver ring on her finger glinting in the sunlight. For a moment, it looked like a tiny star resting on her hand. Daniel's throat tightened. He whispered to himself, "She fixed more than a car. She fixed a man who'd forgotten what kindness feels like." He got into his Mustang, the same car that had brought them together, and as he drove away, he realized he wasn't just leaving behind a town. He was leaving behind the version of himself, who thought money was the measure of worth. Somewhere in that small house by the forest, a little girl was about to build her future, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt truly proud, not of what he owned, but of who he had become.